because we look like that contract might well come through. We might end up also delivering vet into all the schools as well. So it's pretty.
You're going to be busy.
It's pretty huge. So we are going to be busy. So we need to get good at doing all of these sorts of things. So it's, in typical fashion, we try and kill two birds with one stone. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, I need to talk to you about laws. Now, first thing I'm going to say is get advice, because I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, and the best I can do is introduce you to sort of the things you should be concerned about. And like I say, there's a lot of laws to know about, and you need to have a solicitor, a lawyer, whatever you want to call them. You need to have someone that you can go to, just like Kelly did, when things get a bit hairy. I've already covered this, but I'll just cover it again. There is generally 92,000 pages of law that you need to know in order to operate a business in Queensland. That actually is it. And the trouble is that ignorance is not a defence. You can't say, I didn't know about that. You are meant to know about that particular, all those particular laws. I just also want to make the point that the governments of today, while they write laws for every business, and therefore they write them in incredible detail, they write them to catch all the possible loopholes. The trouble with that is the laws become very big and they look very scary. The governments these days are recognising that small businesses, if they're going to support them, if they're going to grow, because small businesses account for like 96% of the employed people in Australia are in small businesses, if they're going to support them, they've got to let us off a lot of the compliance, and they are. Just about every law that's developed these days has a, okay, but what about small business? And they say, all right, well, GST, you don't have to register if you don't do 75,000. You'll find things, accounting. You don't have to keep accrual accounting, you can do cash accounting. These are actually compromises, and the compromises are deliberately designed for small business. So don't go thinking that just because there's all this law and that you've got to comply with, that you necessarily have to comply with it as a small business. They write it for the corporate lawyers to stop them getting loopholes, but for you guys, in small business, they do allow an awful lot of leniency. So just be a bit careful. And the reason I say that is be careful of consultants that come to you and say, I'm here to help you comply with the 92,000 pages. And all it'll cost you is all of your capital. So you've got $100,000, like I said about that restaurant. They had all this money set aside to build a kitchen, and they spent $62,000 compliance. And I spent, for exactly the same business, I spent $1,500. Because when the guy showed them the 92,000 pages, they panicked and they said, oh my God, we need help. And I said, you certainly do, and we're the people to help you. When the reality of it was that you didn't need to comply at that level. So just be a bit careful. Like I say, there's three laws that we have that come at us in business in Australia. We have federal government in Canberra, state government, obviously the Liberal government in power at the moment, and we also have the local council. For most of you, it's the Brisbane City Council. Some of you, it could be Logan, some of it could be wherever you happen to be located. Local councils aren't a law unto themselves, they are a creation of the state government. So the state government, if they want to, can actually make local councils just go away, like they did recently when they amalgamated them all. I don't know whether you remember that. Well, that's the state government telling the local government we're going to do this. Because the local government don't exist, even though we vote for them, they don't exist in their own right. They don't exist under the Constitution. Only the state government exists under the Constitution, but the state government create these local councils, and they can decreate them if they choose to. But they give the local council certain jobs to do, and that's to do with home businesses for us. Certain licences are all done by the local, and local planning, environmental planning is all done by local councils. So I don't know, I guess it's important to know where all of these come from, and like I say, you would have done this last week. If you didn't do this, you should be doing this. You should do this, you probably missed it, Dennis. You need to go to ABLIS and answer all those questions, and most of you got a printout of how many pages? 50? 100?
65.
65 pages, yeah.
Haven't even opened it.
That's the scary nature of it all. What I will get you to do, and we might do this on Thursday, is I might get you that you should have had a summary page. Wasn't there a page? Was it?
Yeah.
And we need to probably just go through that summary page and just sort of say, really important, not so important, information only, and so forth. And it's important that we break that down because, like, I want you guys to get help, but I don't want you guys to be. I don't want you guys to be in someone else's fear mitigation strategy. If you were a bunch of lawyers and I was explaining to you how you should build your business, I'd be saying, guys, build your business on fear mitigation. Tell people they've got 92,000 pages to comply with. Make it sound scary. Come up with examples about how people have lost their homes and all that sort of stuff, and then you'll get your fees, you see. But I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to you guys. And so just be a bit careful because some of their strategies are designed to fear, and then they obviously provide the solution to the fear that they've created. Pretty clever business model. So we don't want to be party to that, do we? No. So the way to be party to that is to understand the things that the government is really in on and the things that they actually are a little bit more forgiving of. Yeah. I want to talk quickly about contracts, and you know, this whole university subjects are just to the law of contract. So we're going to cover it in about 3 minutes. So it's a bit unfair, but I just want to give you some ideas about contracts. Contracts are not just those papers that are duly signed and bound and triplicate and kept in a safe place. Contracts are things that we enter into every day. Every day we enter into contracts. We don't even realise it. We're in and out of contracts because contracts, as you'll see down below, they can be written, they can be verbal, or they can be implied. In other words, by your behaviour, you behaved in a way that looked like there was a contract between the two of you. You can't say there was no written or oral contract because the way you were behaving, obviously there was some sort of contract. And this one is particularly about partners. You've got to be careful as partners that if you behave like partners, the law can actually say you are partners. And so you've got to be a bit careful about your involvement and other people's involvement, that they don't actually come in and become partners under the law and end up committing contracts that end up binding on you. So they are legal. So a contract is a legally binding agreement between two parties, or sometimes two or more parties. They do create obligations, they do create risks, they do actually also involve rights. Like I say, they can be written, verbal, implied. The only one that has to be written is anything to do with property. You can't say, but you said you'd sell that house to me for $10,000 and you know, I'm going to take you to court over it. And with property, it is only what's written on paper that counts, but in a lot of other ways, just implied contracts can actually also be taken to court. Obviously, you have much greater trouble proving to the court that someone's broken a contract that was implied. You might have to spend an awful lot of money to prove that, but it still is a possibility. The reason that we try and document things is because it's much easier to prove. But an implied contract can be proven. So there's 6 elements to make a contract enforceable, and this is important for you guys to realise when you're entering into things and when you're trying to get other people contractually obligated to you. These are the sorts of things, and this is the sorts of things your lawyer will guide you in. But just be aware of these things. There has to be intention. You know, when your brother makes a promise to you, that's not a contract. Mm-hmm. It's a relationship that you've got between friends or between family. It's not it wasn't necessarily intended to enter into a contract. So the first thing the courts try to decide is, was there a real intention to enter into a contract? Second thing, there has to be some sort of offer and acceptance. There has to be, you made an offer and the other party made some sort of acceptance in the deal. And the acceptance must be communicated. You must prove that was communicated. There has to be some sort of consideration paid, some sort of value that was implied. And I don't know whether I said to this class, but in the recent Olympics, Paul McCartney sang. Do you remember that? Some of you are old enough to know that he was a famous Beatle. The rest of you go, so who was he? He got paid £1 to do that. So here's this world-famous beetle got paid £1. And the reason he got paid £1 is because there was no legally enforceable document that he signed if he wasn't paid something. If there was no consideration paid, then the contract that he signed was not enforceable. So to make it enforceable, they actually paid him £1. And if he was clever, he would have put that pound in a frame and he would have auctioned it, wouldn't he, for $1 million, because that's a pretty powerful pound to own for memorabilia. And they used to have it as a peppercorn rent. I don't know whether you're ever familiar with that, but you know a peppercorn? You all know what a peppercorn is? They used to, because their consideration has to take place, they would rent you a place for a peppercorn. And every year you had to turn up with a peppercorn to pay for it. So obviously, because to give it away free, you can't give away something for free. You can't enter into a legally binding contract where there's no consideration. So just be aware of that. You just have to know about that, really. But that's why Paul McCartney was paid £1. And me being a student of contracts, I said, I know why he was paid £1. Capacity, you can't be a minor under 18 in Australia. You can't be insane. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So when you go to sign a contract, maybe just sort of drool a bit, rub your face a bit, because you can't enter into a contract with someone who's a bit insane. So maybe be, or you know, smell of alcohol, because that might be a way out. If you're drunk, you can't. It's not legally enforceable. Or you can't enter into a contract with a non-corporation or a non-entity. Now, the local darts club that get together and they decide to call themselves Belmont Darts Club, and it looks very legitimate, and they have a president and a vice president and all this, and they have a bank account and all that sort of stuff. But if they are not a legal, if they're not an association, if they haven't formed an association, if they haven't formed a company, if they haven't created a partnership, if they've created a nothing, and they sign the cheque and sign the agreement as the Belmont Darts Club, but no such entity exists, then the contract can't survive. Unless it's in the guy's name, or unless it's in a legal entity's name, there can be no contract. So be a bit careful when you enter into contracts and they sign it in the name of a corporation or a name that actually is not an entity. It's not a legal entity. And remember, a legal entity is either a person or an association or a registered company. So go looking for the ABN numbers, go looking for the registration identification. And they might look like a very legitimate organisation, but they actually don't exist as an entity. So just be very careful with that. There has to be genuine consent. You know, it has to be what you've entered into has to be genuinely what you decide to do. They can't misrepresent to you, and they can't do unconscionable conduct. You know, unconscionable conduct is sort of like getting you to sign with a gun at your head. You know, that contract is not enforceable. The courts will just not accept that it's a legally binding contract, because unconscionable conduct is where you've used your power to force someone to do something. And that's true of you doing it, and that's true of someone doing it to you. If it's proved to be unconscionable conduct, then there's a very good chance that the courts won't accept it as a legally binding contract. And there has to be, as I talked to you about Kelly, there has to be some legality about it. And I used to have this all the time. Every time I would sell a business, they would sign me up to you're not allowed to trade a cafe within 3,000 kilometres of this spot, you know. And so what they were doing is obviously trying to protect their business. And so what they would do is they would try and get me to sign that. Now, I had no problem signing that because it's not enforceable. You cannot stop me in a free country from going and opening up a business where I choose. So, because there's another law that kicks in, and this is, you know, I might agree to it, but there's another law that kicks in that just simply says that. You can't create a restraint of trade. You can't stop people from opening a business and forcing a lesser competition.
Yeah.
Now, for commercial reasons or for reputation reasons, you might actually not do that, but not under law. You're not opening within that sphere because of law. You're opening for obviously other reasons. You know.
What about the no compete sort of thing that Kelly mentioned? Because there's a clause that people can. Yeah,
and it's hard. Like, you know, the reason why those people went away, because it's almost impossible to prove. It's almost, you know, they have to prove that they suffered some loss and all that sort of stuff. And any court action is, you know, from my experience, it's 50,000 on the table. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
you know, or want to get chewing gum off your car or something. It's a $50,000 bill. The best thing you can possibly do is settle on day one and just get out of it, whether you've got the strongest case or not. So a lot of those things, you know, they do exist, and lawyers will tell you that it's all very good, but boy, it's a very, very grey area because it cuts across that whole area of competition law and that sort of stuff.
Because I was reading about, Laser, we were talking at work about the diva stores that are now the big store or something. You know, the cheap jewelry store?
Yeah.
Well, you know, Colette stores, that lady used to be in partnership with the guy that did Diva and Revisa, but she had a no-compete clause for 3 years. She couldn't do that, and now she's bought out all these Colette stores and stuff. So, but she had 3 years she couldn't do that because of her clause, by leaving that partnership.
I know, but anyway, just the major point is you can't commit someone to do, you can't restrict someone on, get someone to sign something that's illegal. You can't say, even though I agree to it, if it's illegal, it's not an enforceable contract. So they are the 6 things. Now, they are the 6 things that the courts will look for before they even consider the case. They'll say, they want to first of all say, is there a legal contract between you and the other person? And they're the 6 things they want to tick off first. So when you're entering into a contract, think about these things. When people are entering into your contracts, think about these things. So it's a matter of just being aware of them. They are the fundamental basis of law, and obviously you'll get legal support. You know, you shouldn't be really entering into any contract without a lawyer there present, because they have what they call public indemnity, or not. It's not public indemnity. What's it called, Phil? But suing someone over because of their professional advice. They are covered by that. So if something goes wrong, you can actually sue your lawyer over it. So that's why they're always good to have. Yeah, I'll put this in. When things go wrong, that hurts, doesn't it? It looks bad. In law, there's 2 things. There's civil and there's criminal. They are not the same animal. You know, like I say, when you get sued by someone, you're getting sued in the civil way because you haven't paid something, or you've done something wrong, you've breached some contract. This is a civil action. It's brought about by 2 citizens within a society that want the courts to help them sort out a dispute. That's a civil action. What